1, 2, 3.
Aunt Marjorie dies, she's one of the Pewterschmidts, and leaves Peter and Lois her fancy $1 million worth house in some fancy rich town. Peter and Lois then promptly move there because Peter sold their old house in Quahog without Lois' consent. In the end, he misses the money though and fucks up, so everything is back to normal. There's several notable things about this episode. First of all, this is our first introduction to the Pewterschmidts and their rich lifestyle. Second, the intro shifted, playing at the very beginning of each episode now instead of about 1 minute in. But I gotta say, I prefer the latter. Anyways, this episode is awesome. It's way better than anything season 1 has to offer. You can tell the writers knew where they were going with this one, and there's no 6-minute plot. The jokes land with insane precision, and they are really funny. Also, the conclusion is good, and the plot flows well. There's just nothing to criticize here. You can also tell they put a lot of effort into this episode. There's literally a 3-minute long song called "We're Only Here to Wipe Your Ass." Also, I noticed one thing here, which is that there's a scene where Stewie tells two butlers to fight to the death, which could have been an inspiration for the first chicken fight, but I'm just guessing. Top of the list season 1 and overall, great episode.
Lois, sometimes it's appropriate to swear. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. You bastard.
This episode is all about Peter trying to impress his Catholic, hardworking dad that he's indeed not a failure, but because that doesn't work literally immediately, he borderline kidnaps the Pope, and they come to a conclusion that actually, Peter doesn't need to impress his dad because they fucking hate each other. That's not the interesting stuff here, of course. There's some interesting things I found myself. Basically, apparently, they wanted to set up a running gag early in the show where Chris goes to Lois sometimes and says some word, and Lois is like, "Oh, Chris, word you just said is not a very nice word. Word you just said."
Knows those big gray pussy willows in his ears?
Chris, that's a terrible word. Pussy willows.
Which very obviously failed, like it's not even funny, it's just weird. There's a sunroom scene, which are incredibly rare, and Meg is apparently in a relationship with Kevin. I already mentioned this on the Hero Lives Next Door episode, but I'll say it again. In that episode, Meg basically tries to win over Kevin, but I didn't think much of it considering it only got like 2 minutes of airtime amongst the 4 plots and 50 cutaways. But apparently that's canon now. Anyways, this episode was good. So far season 2 has been a lot better than season 1. It seems like they really got into the flow here and knew where they wanted to go with the show. I'm putting it at second in the list, but that's only because it's really difficult to compete with the banger that came before this.
You're a good woman, Lois. Perhaps you won't burn in hell after all. Maybe you just go to purgatory with all the unbaptized babies. Hey, there you go, Lois. You love kids.
We bring the boom. That's what we do. We bring the boom. We bring the boom to you.
Y2K happened and the world blew up, so Peter and his family walked across the country to the Twinkie factory in Natick, building a tower called New Quahog, which they promptly get kicked out of because Peter is an idiot. The episode resolves in one of those shitty, it was all a dream cliche endings, but I really couldn't care less at all. This episode was one of the best Family Guy has to offer. But let's start with some more interesting facts first. First of all, we got our very first chicken fight of the entire show. Personally, hate me for it, but I like chicken fights, if they're not forced though. I think they're a decent way to blow animation budget, and a giant chicken is my favorite character of the entire series, and also the only skin I own in Fortnite, but that's beside the point. Also, I'm not supporting chicken fights here, I'm just saying they can be good. Anyways, another interesting thing here is that Trisha Takanawa is mentioned for the first time, and personally I like her a lot. She's one of those characters that just never gets old. She reminds me of my Japanese teacher at times. And then finally, the Meg and Kevin shit's back. She said, "You get a date with Kevin once and then the world blows up," meaning this was probably originally supposed to be an ongoing theme in the show. I really hate the fact that they effectively wrote her out of the show by making her a punching bag, because I want to see how this Kevin shit ends. Also, isn't Kevin like 22 in the later episodes? He's a little more veteran and Meg didn't age at all, so I have no clue what to make of that, because he looks a lot younger here. Now on to the actual review of the episode. It's fucking amazing, one of the best Family Guy episodes of all time. I know for a fact that nothing is dethroning this until season 10 where another one of my favorite episodes come up. The pacing and the writing is incredible. They did less cutaway gags which resulted in the episode being less funny, but way more entertaining. And the pacing, chef's fucking kiss. It all seems completely reasonably paced, with the actual plotline goes from Peter not even knowing what Y2K is, to him and his family being kicked out of a post-apocalyptic town they built in a year, while singing a song that was used in the episode as a running gag. All of that on top of a chicken fight that lasts like a minute and a half. Literally peak television. I was already impressed by season 2 episode 1, but this is completely crazy and blew me out of the water. Top of the list both overall and season-wise.
Peter, you've been down there all day. I hope you're all ready. Ah!
Oh my god! The government is here! Run, E.T., run!
Ryan is in the midst of a midlife crisis because he can't come to terms with the fact that Lois doesn't love him. That's basically it. Also, Stewie just starts pissing on random things halfway throughout the episode. It's not important. Anyways, first thing I notice is that the intro shift is gone, which I think is awesome. I already gave my opinion on the intro shift, so let's hope this stays for now. Also, these episodes just keep getting funnier and funnier. Like, remember that one season 1 episode where I said it was funniest of the season? All of these are about on that level. Looking back, season 1 really sucked ass. Okay, well, it wasn't all that bad, just not as good as season 2. Also, right here we see Rupert used as a watermark for Stewie for the first time. To give some context, in the beginning of the episode, Brian pisses on the carpet and blames it on Stewie. And to keep this lie up, the second time he pisses on the carpet, he put Rupert right next to it to blame it on Stewie, meaning this is officially his main plushie from now on, and it's sort of his watermark. Also, Trisha Takanawa is back, yay! Now, for my actual opinion on this episode, there's not much to say. I thought the episode was all about pretty funny. There was no 6-minute plot, and I think Brian being in love with Lois being put in the focus so early really tells you a lot about the type of guy he is, a massive dickhead. Personally, I found myself getting a bit bored about halfway through the episode, but that's mainly because I don't like Brian all that much, and they barely make jokes in that section of the episode. Overall, a good episode, but not my thing. Very similar to Holy Crap in a way, just slightly better. I'm putting it in between Peter, Caviar Eater, and Holy Crap.
Thank you, Diane. Sex. Some people have it anonymously. What kind of person would do that, you might ask? Well, I'm about to find out. I just picked up a complete stranger in a hotel bar, and he's in the bathroom right now, possibly doing drugs. Watch as I have sex with this potentially dangerous man.
Spooner Street wins a trophy for the best float at the city parade, but they aren't sure which household gets to keep the trophy, so they all fight each other. Meanwhile, Meg starts working in the diners so she can afford a Prada bag, but takes Stewie with her and tells people she's an unwed teenage mother, so she gets more tips. In the end, Stewie is taken by CBS into that one foster home that you can always see on TikTok, like there's just a billion clips of it there anyways, and the entirety of Spooner Street has a team up to get Stewie back. First of all, intro shift is still gone. It seems like they're pretty uncertain where to put the intro at this point, so I'm not going to mention it from now on because it just varies from episode to episode. Then we get a better look at the inhabitants of Spooner Street, starting with Cleveland and his family. Then we get to see the Swanson household with a redesigned Bonnie, and now we have confirmation that Quagmire is indeed single. Otherwise, I really didn't notice a whole lot in this episode other than the fact that we got to look at Kevin, but this time totally unrelated to Meg. It's very obvious here that they slowly started to cut down on cutaways and focus more on the story, which makes most episodes just middle of the road, but I do think this episode is very funny, even though there's no cutaways. Not much else to say. I liked it. Not great, but good. I'm putting it in between Brian in Love and Peter, Caviar Eater.
Quagmire.
Petey.
Cleveland.
Joe.
Bonnie.
Lois.
Cleveland.
Lois.
Bonnie.
Quagmire.
Peter.
Loretta.
Peter is being haunted by death, and while running away from death, Death breaks his ankle, resulting in the Lord of Death simply not applying anymore. After that, Death gives Peter his role so that everybody knows the rules of Death still apply. Honestly, I really love the concept of this episode, and I hate the fact the world wasn't just completely fucked as soon as the rules of Death didn't apply. That would have been a bagger episode and would have landed it second on our list, but before we talk about that, some important things from this episode. It's winter, aka late fall, I'm not really sure. I really don't know why. It seems as though Family Guy was originally supposed to be set in real time. And I think there's no real reason for it to be set in winter late fall except if my theory is correct. Then that's a terrible word, where you just then gags back.
Oh, 'cause he's got a lump on his boobie.
Chris, that's a terrible word. Booby.
Honestly, even though I never found it funny, I'm getting sort of emotionally attached to it, so I hope this isn't the last one yet. Also here we see Meg being used as a sort of a punching bag for the first time ever. Peter, when being haunted by death, tells Meg that she's the man of the house now. As much of a big turning point this is for the series, I really wish they just kept Meg a normal teenage girl. Sad. Anyways, it's also implied in this episode that the Griffins don't actually own their house, because when Death stays on the couch for a while, Peter just says, "You can't stay here, how are we gonna explain your presence to Mr. Roper?" Which is possibly the landlord of the Griffins. I did some research and apparently this was not the landlord also named Mr. Roper from some shitty ass sitcom that aired back in the day. But now I'm gonna imply this is canon from now on because I want it to be. Anyways, I think this episode is good. It's not funny, but I think the plot carries the thing. Funnily enough, I think this is the worst plot we've seen so far in season 2, but it's still not bad. I'm putting it at the bottom of the list, and this is the first episode to fall in the season 1 territory in the overall ranking.
We now begin our final approach into Los Angeles International. If you look out the window to your right, you'll see the San Fernando Valley, where my brother Gary makes a very nice living directing porn. We'll be on the ground in 10 minutes.
Lois takes over the theater group of London? What the fuck did I write down in this script? Lois takes over the theater group of Quahog and organizes a play, which is promptly hijacked by Peter after he's allowed to produce due to Lois feeling pity. In the end, though, the performance doesn't turn out of his shit and everybody claps. Also at the end, Lois gives a speech about how people shouldn't be clapping, which is easily the most ahead of their time social commentary I've ever seen. Like, she literally calls the performance flop, you can't make this up. This episode aged like fine wine. But before ranking, funny fact time. Princess Passionate Raw is mentioned again in this episode. They already talked about it in the episode from season 1, which I thought was the funniest of the season. It's called The Sun Also Draws, but apparently it's now back. They apparently wanted for all their characters to have some elaborate quirks, with Lois having their piano stuff, Brian being a writer, etc. Which I think is really cool world building in any piece of media. You know, they're just little details where I can't help but point at them and show appreciation for them, because they're so cool and the writers seem to be very invested in what they're doing. We also see Brian being a pretentious asshole and Quagmire hating Brian for being a pretentious asshole for the first time. Something that would later turn into many boring B-plots. Stuff that I actually do care for, because I hate Brian and seeing somebody else on the show hate him as well is just so heartwarming, no matter how fucking boring the plots may be. Also, it's very clear that they cut down on storytelling here and focus more on telling jokes and cutaways, which in and of itself wouldn't be a bad thing, but since the last 3 episodes have been basically filled to the brim with plot, containing like 2 or 3 cutaways each, I think there's a decent balance here. On top of that, I love this plot. I'm always a huge fan of animated sitcoms doing something more interesting than somebody crashed their car, whoopsie doopsie daisy, and le sex is le bad, not trollish, without needing to drag in random celebrities. It's sort of an art in and of itself, because trust me, try to come up with a plot for a Family Guy episode that doesn't revolve around mundane issues and at the same time doesn't spawn in some random performance convention or celebrity. Right now, do it. If you found anything, I can almost guarantee to you that this idea is absolute dog shit that could not fill an episode. Anyways, I'm putting this one in second place between Peter, Caviar Eater, and the Boom.
I don't get it, Mom. If you're so mad at Dad for wrecking your show, why did you come to opening night?
I came because I love the theater. I mean, if I just came here to enjoy watching your father be humiliated when this asinine spectacle of his is ridiculed by everyone in town, what kind of person would I be?
A bitch.
The Griffin family is invited to some weird seminar to win a vote, but there they are offered a mystery box which Peter promptly takes. However, the mystery box only contains 3 tickets to a comedy show. There, Peter thinks he's funny, so he tells jokes at his workplace, one of which is a sexual joke about women to a woman. So he's sent to his seminar to channel his inner woman. And Lois loves him when he comes back, but then not anymore, and then everything's back to normal in the end because of lit tits. Did that sound way too much for one singular episode? That's because it fucking is. By the time Peter finishes the seminar, there's like 7 minutes left in the episode, and they threw in like a minute-long segment of Quagmire being a pervert without any commentary, so that doesn't make things much better. Also, this episode didn't even introduce anything cool or new at all. The only thing I found remotely interesting, but also hidden in the dialogue, aka background in this case, are these two pictures, which I assume are Lois' grandparents. A Google search for these two resulted in nothing, so I have no clue, and now I'm just curious on who these are. Anyways, this episode has a completely disoriented plot, no real message, and is painfully unfunny, even though the first few minutes were actually really decent. But after that, it's just women and their handbags and periods. XD, ruffle. I'm putting it at the bottom of the list.
I am gonna be the first one on Spooner Street to have his own boat!
Whoa, all hands on deck. I'm getting a boat.
Hey, Quagmire, I'm also getting a boat, too.
Right on! Woo! I can't wait to get my sea legs! Yeah!
Well, at least I'll be the fattest guy on Spooner Street to get a boat.
Hey, I'm getting a boat.
Peter and Chris' favorite series goes away, so they describe Chris as a terminally sick patient and go to the Make-A-Wish Foundation to get their show back on air. When people start to notice this, they start praying for Chris. Peter says that Chris is healed, so he doesn't get into any trouble after that, which in turn leads to Peter being worshipped as some kind of divine healer, which makes God angry, so he sends plagues for Earth until Peter apologizes. This episode is about as jam-packed as the last one, but it stays on topic, so I don't mind it that much. First of all though, funny facts. Basically, Stewie is being bathed in the sink in this episode, which is weird considering they never do that in later seasons. For example, in Viewer Mail number 2, Stewie is put into the bathtub, even though he hasn't changed visually at all. So it's a bit weird he's being bathed in the sink here. Also, I just noticed how differently Tom Tucker and Diane Simon are used in these earlier episodes. This has been an ongoing theme throughout the seasons, but in later seasons they're like an actual news reporter, and here they're just vulgar fucks that spout the weirdest shit on live television and give each other theirs. Anyways, I didn't like this episode that much. It suffers from the same problem as the last one, mainly being completely jam-packed and them switching plot points every 3 minutes. And of course the fact that they barely use cutaways here. Absolutely not my thing. Putting it between I am Peter, hear me raw, and Death is a bitch.
Don't worry, I'll talk to her.
Lois decides to run for a school board, but after one of Peter's old teachers gets fired, he decides to run against Lois and leak a naked picture of her on the campaign. In the end, he wins, but still retires and fucks everything up due to him being a massive idiot. Shocker. There's also a side plot about Stewie coming to terms with the fact that he sort of likes Lois, which I thought was neat. But anyways, first of all, funny facts. In the first scene of this episode, we see Rupert for the very first time in this episode, and Stewie talks to him in depth we've never seen before. I don't believe the writers had any clue how big of a character he would later become, but it's very apparent they're playing around with him here. There's also a sudden cutaway gag where Peter reads checkers, which might be the only one of that kind in the entire series. There's also a cutaway gag where Peter talks about his Mexican uncle that used to be the best at cockfights, but surprise surprise, he actually beats chickens up instead of betting on them, which might be a hint that chicken fights are gonna be reoccurring from now on. Now for this episode, there's not much to say here. At first I actually thought this was social commentary on the two-party electoral system, because it was literally Griffin versus Griffin, with colors matching blue and red and voters being easily swayed by a few sentences. But given the fact that they don't really elaborate on that, it's either very silent commentary without point, or just not the case. In my opinion, this is a very good episode. It's sort of similar to The King is Dead, but just slightly worse because of a more far-fetched plot and less cutaways. But The King is Dead was a really good episode, so being just slightly worse than it is actually a compliment, putting it below Love Die Trophy, which shows how minuscule the quality difference between these episodes really are.
What that means. And community activists.
Go, Dad!
He can't hear you.
Go, Dad!
Chris paints a really cool painting, which Peter manages to sell for $5,000. So they're invited to New York so Chris can become an artist. There, Chris is manipulated by some arch-schmucky that he can never see his father again. So Peter, instead of trying to get Chris back, tries to make Meg popular by making her talk to pigeons, which obviously fucking doesn't work. But in the end, all is well because Chris is let go, due to him sucking dick and balls at art. First of all, funny facts. Meg is used as a punching bag here again, but this time a lot more obviously than the last time. She's called fat by some carnival worker, called his son by Peter, and is called Tanamus. Then of course, Chris' reoccurring art hobby is back, which I've already stated my thoughts on. Then, the archmonkey from the episode says the phrase, "We're in the new millennium" at the end of the episode, which likely confirms my thoughts that Family Guy was originally supposed to be set in real time a few episodes ago, where I pointed out it was snowing outside. And for the very last funny fact here, Stewie goes to some massive ass room with lots of nation flags here, and this scene pisses me off so much. They took their time painting the fucking Faroe Islands correctly in the back, but this is Russia? Also, what the hell is this inverted Czech Republic flag in the background? This is very visible for most of the scene. Stewie stops here. It's the first flag in the background. Now onto my thoughts about this episode. Personally, I really loved it. First of all, the visual design is amazing. Not only did they very obviously put a lot of effort into these New Yorkie backgrounds, painting elaborate backgrounds filled with trash for only one scene, but they also worked a lot with visual gags here as well. They also designed tons of new characters, for example Artie Chris, Kate Moss, and the Archmonkey. There's however one thing about this episode I don't like, that being the plot. It's way too dragged out at the beginning and a perfect example for why I hate 6-minute plots. Luckily, they managed to get out of it with the good pacing they do here. The 6-minute plot is like 8 minutes long, but if you asked me, I would have guessed maybe like 4 at most. Also, I don't think this episode is particularly funny either, but I don't really care that much. This episode just comes with a certain subjective level of enjoyment I can't quite narrow down. Putting it between The King is Dead and Peter Caviar Eater.
Oh, we used to kid this guy all the time. Bob misses his mommy. Bob misses his mommy.
Meg is embarrassed by Peter at a local festival, and by Chris and the others at a sleepover, so she decides that the best course of action here is to take her parents to a live problem reviewing show with Diane Simmons as a host. There, they get picked up by a studio executive, and they get cast for their own live-action reality shows. In the end, they all quit out though and have to stay in a motel until the contract ends. I love this episode. It's funny, it's got a really good premise, I like the way they handle the plot, and I'm pretty sure we just got to see how the Meg-Kevin relationship ended. After embarrassing Meg at the festival, a naked Peter, he was naked at the festival by the way, goes up to Kevin that works at a gas station and just points out Meg in the car and greets him like nothing ever happened. If this is the last we ever see of this relationship, then I think we know how that ended. Otherwise, this episode is just filled to the brim with good gags. Even though there's not much to say about this episode, it's going in second behind The Boom, which is effectively first place as The Boom is one of my favorite episodes of all time.
Here, a good breakfast is the foundation of a good day.
And a bad breakfast is the foundation of indigestion. Hey-o! Hey, I'm Brian.
Stu is over at Nana's house, the Pewterschmidt's house. This is the second time we ever see them, and Lois sends Brian to pick him up. This goes horribly wrong and they have to complete a journey to get to Rhode Island again. On the way, Brian also finds his mother in Austin, which is cool. In the meantime, Peter gets obsessed over a communicative tape, which is cool I guess, one of my favorite side plots this season. Remember how I said no episode was gonna beat The Boom? Well yeah, no episode is gonna beat The Boom, but this one comes awfully close. It's really fascinating to see how fleshed out Brian and Stu's dynamic was early in the show. Not only that, but this is literally the first Brian and Stewie plot ever, so they basically nailed it spot on the first time. On top of that, we get to see Brian's origins, and we get another look at the Pewterschmidts. I really could not have enjoyed this episode more. This was the only road tour I hadn't seen yet, and it's the second best one, falling just beneath my favorite episode of the entire series. The humor is amazing, the pacing is good, the plot is good, the Stewie-Brian dynamic is much more complex and not as flanderized as it would later become. This is just genuine peak. Sadly, there's not a lot of funny facts here, but this episode doesn't need to have them included. They focus more on the plot and that's perfect. I'm calling it, if this episode had no side plot, it would have been the best of the show. Sadly, I'm placing it in second, falling slightly behind the boom.
Hola. Me llamo es Brian. Let's see. Nosotros queremos ir con ustedes.
That was pretty good. But actually, when you said me llamo es Brian, you don't need the ace. Just me llamo Brian.
Oh, you speak English?
No, just that first speech and this one explaining it.
You're kidding, right?
Okay?
'Cause if you use Toad, then I'm telling you, you can kiss your life goodbye.
A toad-licking epidemic breaks out at T. James Woods High School, resulting in Peter going undercover as Lando Griffin to stop it. Believe it or not, he actually turns out to be really popular, and after stopping a drug epidemic, he wants to take Meg to the dance to make her popular as well. This doesn't actually happen though, he takes Connie DeMico instead. But at the very end, he drops out on Connie DeMico at the dance, making Meg popular instead. First of all, funny facts. This is the first episode which Connie DeMico and her clique appear in, and I'm pretty sure she doesn't appear for a damn long time after this, making it pretty surprising that her character even survives as long as it did. Then of course we have the very obvious fact that Meg and Chris go to different schools. In the pilot, Chris literally just says, "I'm 13", making him a middle schooler, but apparently I just didn't notice that. This is proof that the characters did actually age over the seasons, as they are depicted going to the same school later on, like for example in that one viral ass clip where they beat up some children and somebody put boom music over it. Anyways, we get introduced to a new character here, Mr. Shepard, which is also a recurring character later on, and here we see his suit is brown, which is actually a different color than it later on is. Whoa! No way! And the last funny fact for this episode isn't necessarily a funny fact as much as it is a personal anecdote, but back in the day when I was like 10 or 11, I used to play this game called Animation Throwdown. It's basically just a card game where they take prominent figures from shows like Archer and King of the Hill and throw in the game together. And I always assumed that the toad-licking stuff was from Futurama, because you know they had the Hypno Toad, and the toads in this episode do look an awful lot like they could be from Futurama. Anyways, this episode was fucking amazing, like holy shit! I loved the plot, and it was refreshing to see Peter being a good dad after the last few episodes, and they also had the song in the episode where Peter literally sings why drugs are bad. And I started out just thinking, oh my god, what is this gonna be? But holy shit, this slaps way more than it should have. I'm putting this episode in second between The Boom and Road to Rhode Island, which, by the way, is definitely gonna put this episode in like the top 30 overall.
Yeah, I was terrified of asking Phoebe Diamond to the prom. I finally got up the guts, but I had this damn nervous twitch. Phoebe?
Yeah?
I was wondering if you'd do me the honor of
Lois signs Stewie up for daycare, where he finds a girlfriend and then breaks up with her sometime later. That plot is irrelevant and I won't be talking about it. Meanwhile, Lois gets a part-time job as a stewardess and Peter flies with her as all his flights are now free. But at the end, they're trapped in Cuba after hijacking, where Lois finally decides to quit her job and they go to the United States illegally because they can't wait 2 fucking weeks for their passport. Wow. First of all, some funny facts. My theory that the show is supposed to be in real time is proven right once again, as Chris is seen taking down the Christmas decoration in this one. If you can't recall, the last episodes were set in winter, aka end of 1999. Then we also get the first Closet Monkey and the first Drunken Clam appearance, 2 major things that featured here. Overall, this was a good episode. I'm sorry if I sound like I'm half-assing this episode, by the way. I am writing the script at 2 AM. I just worked on this for like 4 hours and it's 3 AM because it's the 24th right now. And I still want an episode out this year. Putting it between Loveday Trophy and Running Mates. Anyways, I'm sleeping now so that a catastrophe like this doesn't happen again.
You know, you people are nothing like the communists they show on TV.
We now return to the communists.
I hear report cards were handed out today. What were your grades?
Quit Stalin and answer your father. Go ahead, honey, and tell us your marks.
Like Khrushchev?
Did somebody say Khrushchev?
Peter and Lois debate about getting a new car, but when they eventually do so, it breaks down immediately. By pure coincidence, Peter then meets a member of the Mafia, allowing him to break their car so that insurance gets a new one. After that, the mob boss of the Mafia wants a favor back from Peter, so he orders Peter to take his completely unlikable nephew, Big Fat Paulie, out to the movies. Peter then tells the nephew that they can't be friends because of his wife, so Big Fat Paulie orders a literal hit on Lois and is killed promptly after, leaving the rest of the episode dealing with how they can get rid of the hit. First of all, funny facts. In this episode, Peter goes to a little diner, which is apparently owned by Cleveland, which is extremely weird considering there's zero mention of this anywhere else in the show or the internet. Like, really, what the hell happened here? We also get more confirmation Chris is a middle schooler, due to him dropping his age in this episode. Honestly, I can't even believe he's 13 in this episode. Like, I really always believed he was 15 or 16, which he is in the later seasons, and I'm glad they aged him up because he just does not look 13 in the slightest. And for the last funny fact, the crude wrongs I mentioned in season 1 are now finally fixed. Yippee! Personally, I really enjoyed this episode. Like, it's pretty amazing how they just managed to make consistently good episodes here. Like, at this point, I'm sure that the top 50 overall in the end is just gonna be full of season 2 episodes. This episode wasn't even particularly funny either. I just think that the premise is good and they expand on that premise well, because they just cram so much into 22 minutes, it's insane. Like, it's not even poorly paced either, they just cram tons of stuff in and it fits. But I should mention that sometimes the strategy results in massive catastrophes. Anyways, it's going between Peter Caviar Eater and Love Thy Trophy.
All I gotta do is make a call.
Ah, jeez! You okay?
Chris is self-conscious about his weight, so Peter puts him on a diet. But at some point in the weight loss journey, he learns of liposuction surgery, taking Chris to a lipo doctor. But while Chris declines, Peter himself then actually gets lipo and acts like a dick until he's fat again because he falls in a tub of lard in the Quahog lard factory. This is actually how they end the episode. There's also a B-plot about Stewie getting fat, which I don't care much for at all. I just think the design of Stewie is funny. Anyways, this would have been a great episode if they just focused on Chris here. Seeing him struggle with his weight issues is something that was very interesting for me in the first half, and left me rooting for him. But they literally just drop out of it like halfway through the episode, what the fuck? And ironically, if these two were separate episodes, they'd most likely be second and third or second and fourth or something overall. Because I think both separate themes are extremely interesting. But no, they just abandon one halfway into the episode and leave it unconcluded. I'm not even kidding. There's no conclusion to this Chris plot. Fuck you. On top of that, this is a very iconic and funny episode as well. It's got the ripped Peter. They're gonna be looking for army guys, which was the second exposure I ever had to Family Guy. Only beaten out by me watching the entire Da Boom episode at like 3 years old, which is a core memory of mine, also possibly the reason I like it so much. Overall, this episode is just nothing but all around disappointing. So many good jokes and two crazy plot lines wasted on this. Sad, honestly. Going between Love Thy Trophy and Damn It Janet, because I actually did still end up enjoying it.
Trust me, Chris, sometimes it's better not to fit in. You're all stupid. See, they're gonna be looking for army guys.
Peter finds out he's not officially part of the United States, aka his house and the territory surrounding it isn't. So he founds his own nation, Pretoria, which quickly gets sieged by the US after he tries to annex Joe's pool. First of all, I found one funny fact, that being the fact that Jerome isn't a barkeeper here. And this is probably gonna be the last funny fact for some time now. The reviews were getting way too long, and if I don't see anything interesting, don't expect me to call it out. Anyways, iconic episode. Extremely funny, insanely good premise. Only thing I didn't like is the 6-minute plot in my opinion. Now me personally, I'm also a big fan of characters trapped in X location, how do they get out type plots, and this is just exactly what I'm looking for. Lois homeschooling the Pits, Peter inviting dictators over, all just nice bits that I thought were really entertaining to watch. Even though I don't have much to say, it's still a really good episode. putting it between Road to Rhode Island and 15 Minutes of Shame.
Oh, this is the newest province of Pretoria. I call it Johio.
What? You can't just come over here and annex my pool.
Oh, yeah? Well, according to paragraph 7, sentence 3, word 8 of the Geneva Convention, the. So tough luck, Swanson.
Meg wants to get into college, but can't due to a lack of extracurriculars. As a result, she starts writing for her school newspaper, which goes horribly wrong when Peter swaps out one of her articles for an article called Luke Perry Escape. That leads to them getting sued by Luke Perry, and they change the plot 10 minutes into the episode. Gee fucking jeez, why would they do that? This episode was so funny, especially with the little side plot where Stewie hijacks Chris using a device so he isn't a short anymore. But that ends in some super scene as well because they gotta focus on the irrelevant A-plot. They start this episode with like a 5-minute scene of the family in the university, which was so perfect. I really thought to myself this episode would beat the boom if they kept going like this. It was so funny. I laughed at nearly every scene. The interview was funny as well. Peter swapping the story out was interesting to see as well. But the second it cut to the living room with Meg saying, "We're getting sued by Luke Perry," I just knew it was fucking over for this episode, honestly. The last 3 or 4 episodes, they swapped out the plot 10 minutes in. I just didn't mention it in episode 16 because they stayed on topic. I thought it sucked in episode 17, but still enjoyed both plots. And they stayed sort of on track, but it just reminds me of one of those shitty 5 minutes plots they do at the beginning of each Family Guy episode nowadays, that have zero correlation to the main plot at all. The characters just effectively say, "Well, that's odd, folks," and then the camera shifts to something completely different. This one is even worse. Peter just spawns himself into the episode, even though he wasn't in focus at all, and completely derails it. This is almost completely unenjoyable except for the B-plot in the first 10 minutes. On top of that, the second plot contains some random celebrity they spawned in, and drew with way more facial details than the rest of the family, which is so cliche in my least favorite type of episode trope in TV. If this episode didn't have the first 10 minutes and the B-plot for itself, this episode would have gone at the bottom of the list, and with flying distance with that, but it does have that going for itself. I'm putting it between Death is a Bitch and I Am Peter, Hear Me Raw, which says a lot about an episode I enjoyed this much at the beginning. The Luke Perry shit is just the first downright unenjoyable thing I've seen from the show.
What about my interview?
Mayor West asked me to give you this.
Uh-oh. Of course, you realize this means war.
Pawtucket Pat, the main beer brewer of the city, hides 4 script viewers in his beers and scatters them all across Quahog. And surprise, surprise, Peter wins one! Would have been a pretty shitty plot if he didn't. He then goes on a tour but gets kicked out halfway through, instead going home and accidentally discovering that he is gifted at the piano while drunk. This emerges with a B-plot about Lois trying to win a piano competition, and I think the entire episode plays out pretty well, with Lois winning in the end and Peter being wasted. Personally, I think this episode would have been a lot better if they just cut out the tour scenes entirely, and even let the scripture part play out, or just cut that out as well, and then introduce the piano stuff, because I think that the episode would have been way more charming if Peter just walked in and kicked absolute ass. Also, this isn't just exclusive to this episode, but it's amazing how often you can just point your fingers and stuff and go, "What? Oh, that's where that's from." Like, I've done something like this, I'm pretty sure, for every single episode this season. It's insane how many memes this season sparked. Anyways, this is one of those episodes that's just very consistently good and funny throughout, where I can't say much. Going between there's something about Paulie and Peter Caviar Eater. Final episode of the season, and also the one where I have the least amount of things to say. Anyways, Peter tries to teach Chris some responsibility by getting him a job, but switches up on him trying on Cleveland Jr. instead, but after seeing he is a gifted golfer. But at the end, they both realize they're father and son and shouldn't leave each other. Oh, so heartfelt. Aww. There's also this suicide plot where he gets a flu after getting vaccinated at the checkup, which is sadly just like any other story plot we've seen so far. Completely irrelevant and inconclusive. Not worth mentioning. Yeah, I like the episode. I really don't know what to say here. This is a good episode, but there's literally nothing to say about it. This could just be from me being fatigued from writing the script at 2 AM again, no. I like the Hickadoola song, going between Damage Jammit and Running Mates.
What does Hickadoola mean? What does Hickadoola mean?
Well, Hickadoola's that special feeling you get when you hold hands with your best gal.
It's cheering real loud for the home team.
It's catching the perfect wave.
It's obeying all the rules.
No way!
Yeah, okay, so that's basically my opinions on Season 2 and older episodes. I think this is a very good season, and I really don't know if anything is gonna be able to top it. I heard that Season 3 is like way better actually, and that some of the best episodes feature there. Yeah, so we'll see how that goes. Until then, please leave a like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment if you've gotten this far. It really helps the algorithm, and I would really appreciate it. Until then, have a good day.
Chillin' on the weekend like usual. Watching SpongeBob and Scooby-Dooby-Doo. She took the wires to my PlayStation, she doing too much. I didn't wipe my butt, I just pooped and got up. She got the cutest daughter, so I went to pick her up. Then almost tossed her, cause she really kicked me right in my nuts. I had to put some ice on them.